So it came out today that Othram helped in a cold case from Idaho. So let's take a look. Okay, the headline says Snake River John Doe identified as Moscow teen found dead in the Snake River in 1982. So it says that the Nez Perce County Sheriff's Office and Idaho State Police Forensic Services have identified a teen who was found dead in the Snake River 42 years ago. Law enforcement agencies teamed up with Othram, Inc., a Texas-based forensic genetic genealogy company, to make a positive ID. The company specializes in analyzing DNA evidence that other methods can't test or that cannot be performed in other labs. According to newspaper archives from the Spokesman Review, 17-year-old Dwayne Searles of Moscow, Idaho, and his friend Michael Coffin drove from Moscow to Boise on June 14, 1982. The 1976 Datsun hit some rocks on a hillside near Riggins, and plunged into the Salmon River. Coffin's body was found 25 miles downriver from the crash site, but over 2 weeks after the crash, a fisherman found a body along a small island in the Snake River. Now remember, the crash happened at the Salmon River, so the other body actually had drifted clear down from the Salmon River into the Snake. That was about 100 miles away south of Lewiston. At the time, no one pieced together that the body was part of the crash near Riggins. An autopsy uncovered a bullet hole to the neck and another to the shoulder. Law enforcement at the time assumed it was the homicide and had no way of identifying the body. He was dubbed Snake River John Doe and buried in an unmarked grave at Normal Hill Cemetery in Lewiston. Coroners at the time could not determine if his cause of death was related to the gunshot wounds or drowning. The sheriff's office noted a 2-inch scar on his right ankle and calluses on both palms, suggesting he had worked manual labor jobs. DNA from the case was shipped to Othram in 2023. Scientists were able to extract DNA and use genome sequencing to build a genealogical profile for the body. That information was then compared to other DNA profiles to find potential family members. This was how the body was identified as being Dwayne Searles, born in 1965. Nez Perce County homicide detectives are now working to determine who shot Searles. Othram says Searles is the 6th case in the state of Idaho that was positively identified using its specialized technology. The company has also successfully helped to identify bodies in Washington, Montana, and other areas of the inland Northwest and throughout the nation. So that's really interesting because, for one, they were able to finally identify the body. So I'm happy for his family, friends, anybody that was waiting on that closure, but he had been shot. So now that begs the question, did he go off the road because he had been shot? Or did he possibly survive the crash, get out of the car, and then somebody shot him? Did he possibly go to get help and somebody thought he was trespassing? This is going to be interesting to find out because since this is such an old case, are they going to be able to find out who shot him? And if that's actually what killed him, or if he was shot before they ended up in the river. So I'm intrigued by this case. So this is going to be one to follow. Now, with that said, talking about Othram, let's talk about J. Embry Pavarotti. Because he said this today in his latest video.
I watched a critiquing content creators video about Othram the other day as she was critiquing my video, and she did something very disingenuous. When she got to the part where it talked about how long it took to create an S&P profile, she used general language. Othram says it could take between 3 days to make a DNA profile, 6 weeks or sometimes longer depending upon circumstances. She alluded that they could do an S&P profile in 3 days. Very disingenuous. Yeah, Othram can do a STR profile in 3 days.
So who is the one being disingenuous, Jay? Not me, because I never said anything about 3 days or even 6 weeks. Let's take a look at what I said in my video. DNA evidence for which an identity is not known are made for that DNA evidence we can help to bring answers, said Colby Layson, Chief of Staff at Othram. He says the technology can be applied to many different cases, such as cold or contemporary. We can develop a DNA profile in a matter of days in a case, but sometimes it takes weeks and sometimes it takes even longer, last one said. Interesting, because that's Othram right there admitting that they can do an SNP profile within days in some cases. So who's to say that's not what they did in the Idaho 4 case? Did you catch that? Because I never said 3 days. I quoted their chief of staff, who said days. Also, that wasn't referring to an STR profile. He was talking about their technology, and their technology is IgG. It's SNP. He wasn't referring to an STR profile. Let's look at that again. He says the technology. Again, he was talking about the IgG, the genetic genealogy. That's what that whole article was about, not an STR profile. Also, in case you weren't aware, STR profiles can be developed in as quickly as 45 minutes. So when he says they can do it in days, he obviously was not talking about an STR profile. The other thing you don't seem to understand is that contemporary cases take precedent over cold cases. So the Koberger DNA would have been moved ahead of any cold cases. And all the cases that you continue to quote are cold cases. There are also cases that have damaged DNA, like hair follicles from years ago. The one you posted on your video was them digging up a grave. So yeah, of course, degraded samples takes longer. When they're digging up a grave from somebody from years ago, that is going to be degraded DNA for sure. But also the cold cases get put behind the contemporary cases. But Othram highlights the cold cases on their website. So of course, every one of the cases that you're looking at is a cold case. Those are apples to oranges to a contemporary case where they have DNA that's not degraded. And as far as touch DNA, yes, sometimes it is degraded, but that doesn't mean 100% of the time it's degraded. So you cannot state with confidence that the Koberger sample was degraded because you just don't know. Now, another thing you said about Othram was that their new way of doing SNP profiles, the kin SNP, means that they're manipulating the DNA. And that's not true. But let's listen to what you said first.
When target tests take months, investigators are compelled to test several potential relatives in parallel. But if it's quicker, the test can be done in series with the selection of each candidate informed by the results for the others, leading to fewer tests overall to get solved. So what they're saying in a nutshell is they test other potential relatives and to minimize the results. If they have a relative that is suspected to be a relative, then they can repair their original profile with that relative's DNA extraction enrichment, therefore creating a profile that matches that really didn't match.
No, in a nutshell, that's not what they're saying. Let's look at that again. Okay, what it's saying is that they don't use the databases. So they don't go to the genealogy databases. You see right there, it says it minimizes privacy protections for voluntarily target testers, and not only because the results are not entered into a genealogy database. When target tests take months, investigators are compelled to test several potential relatives in parallel. But if it's quicker, the test can be done in a series with the selection of each candidate informed by the results for the others, leading to fewer tests overall to get to a solve. So what does this mean? It means unlike with a lot of their cold cases that they do where they don't have any relatives at all that they can get a sample from, they have to use the genealogy databases, and that takes time. and they have to go on there and see if they can find matches and then go contact those people and test them. When they already have a potential family member that comes forward, no matter how distant of a relative they are, they can use this kin SNP, and then that will give them a result. And then if that shows that that is a relative, then they can go seek out another closer relative, and it speeds the process up. It has nothing to do with repairing the DNA. They don't insert the DNA from somebody else into there to get a fake match. And here's a case where they recently used that kin SNP profile. Okay, this was a case that Othram worked on with that kin SNP. So it says in March 2008, the partial remains of an unidentified individual were discovered at the base of the Bixby Bridge in California's Big Sur region. It was determined that the remains were that of an unknown male. Traditional DNA testing was used to develop an SDR profile, which was uploaded into CODIS in hopes that there would be a match. Efforts to identify the man were unsuccessful despite the efforts of law enforcement. The case was entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. With no matches to a known individual and limited information about the partial remains available, the case went cold. The man became known as Monterey County John Doe. In 2022, the Monterey County Cold Case Task Force teamed with Othram to determine if advanced DNA testing could help identify the man. Forensic evidence was submitted to Othram's laboratory. Othram's in-house forensic genetic genealogy team used the profile in a genetic genealogy search to develop new leads in the case. These leads were provided to investigators in Monterey County. Using this new information, a follow-up investigation was conducted, leading investigators to potential relatives of the man. A reference DNA sample was collected from a relative and tested using the KinSNP rapid familiar relationship testing, which allows investigators to infer kinship in both closely and distantly related individuals. The comparison led investigators to identify Monterey County John Doe as Daniel S. Piles, who was born in 1938. Okay, so you can see they used the KinSNP to do the match with the distant relative that had submitted a sample. They didn't repair a DNA profile and add DNA from somebody else into there to create like a false profile. For Embry to even accuse Othram of doing that is just ludicrous. There's no evidence that they are manipulating the DNA and creating fake profiles to try to get matches. Like, reality is the DNA is kosher. There's no hanky-panky going on. So hopefully this was informative again, and if there's something you want me to cover, let me know.